I'm in a Toyota Alphard today. What I want to talk about, the title is not a clickbait. It really happened. I've blown my Toyota Alphard engine. It's really quite sad, really. Hi, this is the Autophiles and I'm Bo. And as you can see, I'm doing this all by myself today. Subhash is not here. A little bit of introduction about this car. This is a 2010 Toyota Alphard, and I bought it in 2013. It was brought into Malaysia by NASA. I had a working relationship with NASA and they gave me a good deal then, and it was quite a good deal actually. And so I bought this car. I inspected this car as it came into Malaysia. I inspected it at the port actually. So it was in its real condition. The mileage was real. You know, a lot of these recon cars that you see here, a 5-year-old car, 4-year-old car, 20,000 kilometers. No, seriously. I mean, don't tell me you actually believe that. So when this car came in, I bought it in 2013. The car was 3 years old, or 3-ish years old. I can't remember. The car was 3 years old. It came in with 100,000 kilometer on the odometer, which is real. It is realistic. 30,000 kilo a year. The condition of the interior and exterior looks like a 100,000 kilometer car. The condition was not mint, it's not pristine, but it is very beautiful. It was very well taken care of. I've owned this car for 5 years, and I've put on we put on 160 over 1,000 kilometers onto it. 160 divided by 5, about 30,000. 30-odd thousand kilometers per year, which is very reasonable amount of mileage actually. I've taken care of this car relatively well. Oil change is always somewhere between 7,000 to 10,000 kilometers. I've always changed the gearbox oil, so every 40,000 kilometers I've changed it. Absorber has been changed. I've changed the pulleys and the bearings. You know, when it makes sound, I would go and service it. I've serviced the aircon, so the car is taken care of quite well. Now, unfortunately, in the last drive, I wasn't driving the car when the car broke actually, but what happened was that there was a leak. There was a leak of engine oil that was near the gearbox. But it didn't show. I don't know why it didn't show where the car was parked. There was no stain of oil at all, and it was about 1,000+ kilometers from servicing time. So I felt that the engine was a little bit rougher. I was just thinking, you know, when it hit the service interval, I'll just send it in service and get it checked. Unfortunately, on that day that the car broke, the person that was driving this car saw that there was a warning light, an orange warning light saying that engine oil level low. So he stopped the car at the side and looked into the dipstick, and well, the engine oil level was a bit low apparently, but it wasn't like critically low. So the person driving the car thought, hey, maybe there is some leak somewhere, but it doesn't look severe. There was no oil leaking down, you know, that is visible. You don't see stains on the road and whatnot. So this person reached his destination and decided, you know what, after whatever he has to do, he'll take the car to the workshop and get it checked out. Very unfortunately, on the way to the workshop, the engine just seized, and I couldn't get it started again. That's really unfortunate. So what happened was that it was practically dry by the time the mechanic got there and the tow truck got there. The engine oil was practically dry. The engine has ceased altogether. So, you know, after an incident like that, sometimes you get a bit discouraged and you feel like you want to get rid of the car and you want to change it, and that definitely crossed my mind. So I did some, I checked around, and they're trading in at what, 70 over 1,000 ringgit trade-in price, which is quite sad actually. In 5 years of ownership of this car, it's depreciated more than half of whatever I paid for. But it's still okay. The amount that I owe the bank is still a lot less than whatever I will get in trade-ins. Very interesting thing is that because I've taken care of the car relatively well, my mechanic actually called me up after he fixed the car. He's asking me, hey, do I want to sell off this car, because he wants to buy it over. He says the condition, actually the moving parts and whatnot, is in very, very good condition. I delayed in answering him. I didn't answer him straight off. I thought about it. I thought about saying yes, but I didn't answer him straight off, and I waited for him to deliver the car back to me. For the first week, I actually didn't touch the car. I didn't touch the car at all because, you know, I don't know, it's like I didn't feel like it. I wasn't in the mood. The car went through a total heart transplant, you know. I just felt very sad. So about on the second week, I decided to take the car out, and my goodness, it was very, very strong. So what was wrong with the car prior to that was that there was a leak. The leak was fixed. The engine mounting was fixed as well. Apparently the engine mounting wasn't really working anymore, so the mechanic decided to change it as well. So other than these two, everything else was working perfectly fine. The gearbox was beautiful, the undercarriages, the suspension geometry, all the suspension parts, all the drivetrain parts, all of it was very, very beautiful. I kept the car in very good condition. So I think I've made my mind up now. After the transplant, I've decided not to sell off the car and to keep it. Probably it will service me for another 5-10 years. I don't know. I feel like keeping it because, you know, it's a good car. So so let's talk a little bit about this 2009, 2010, 2011 Toyota Alphard and Velfire. Now, a lot of you know this car as the Toyota Velfire. What's the difference between a Velfire and Alphard is discussed in a different video. This Toyota Alphard is exactly the same car as the first generation Toyota Velfire. So now we have a second generation Velfire and a third generation Alphard. So the third generation Alphard is exactly the same car as the second generation Velfire. This is a second generation Alphard, which is the same car as the first generation Velfire. I've reviewed this car before, so I won't go so in depth into reviewing this car. I think today what I'm talking about more is what sort of running costs is involved and how is it like living with a Toyota Alphard. First of all, let's talk about maintenance. Now, when I first bought this car, maintenance wasn't the cheapest, and I still don't think it's the cheapest. Some of these Toyota parts, especially these imported Toyotas, can be quite expensive. To give you an example, when I bought this car, the steering would kind of knock a little bit if you were to turn it a little bit faster. So when you turn it fast, especially in a standstill position, you hear a bit of a knock, or you feel, I'm not sure whether you hear it, but you definitely feel it on your hands if you're holding the steering wheel. It's somewhere deep inside. I've checked it out. I've asked around. I've checked it out. It's apparently have something to do with the steering column. For all the years I've owned this car, I've never fixed the problem because it's not exactly a safety issue. It doesn't affect your driving other than the fact that if you were to turn your steering wheel really fast, especially at standstill, you'll feel a bit of a knock. So I didn't fix it. I've asked around how much it would cost. It will cost 2,000 over ringgit for a recon part at that time. I don't know how much it will cost now. And the funny thing is, over the years, that problem has solved itself, which is really odd. No car fixes itself, but this one does. So if you own a Toyota Alphard, maybe if it starts making this noise, don't bother fixing it. It will fix itself with more wear and tear. This is the weird thing about this car. Another part that is a bit expensive is the HID lamp. After about a year of using this car, one side of my the HID bulb got a bit weaker and it started flickering a bit. It's not a cheap fix. It will cost you quite a bit of money to replace these bulbs. So yeah, I gotta watch out for that. But they're generally not bank breaking. Very easy to live with. I've lived with this car for 5 years and I have no problem. Well, other maintenance issue is absorber. Absorber is really cheap. It's like a standard Toyota price or a Toyota Camry kind of range. It's not very expensive. But brakes wear out pretty fast. It's a heavy car. I think Toyota use pretty standard brake system in a lot of their more normal passenger vehicle. So what happened is that maybe this was designed for, you know, something like a Camry and whatnot, but an Alphard is significantly heavier. You're talking about a huge amount of mass being carried, and brakes do wear out really fast, but they're not expensive to fix, definitely not European level. Another thing is the bearings for the belts and whatnot. I've changed it as well. A few other things here and there, but generally they're quite easy to live with, not much problem. An engine replacement, the engine itself, the bare engine itself costs 5,000 ringgit. Replacement labor and whatnot is another 2,000-3,000 ringgit. So it's not very expensive. I've heard nightmares about the CVTs. I've heard some people's CVT breaking. My CVT is working perfectly fine, and I'm not complaining. So, and but I've serviced my CVT quite often. Every 30,000-40,000 kilometers, I would change the CVT oil. Let's see, CVT 286,000 kilometers. So in another 20,000 kilometers, I'll change the CVT oil again. So overall, maintenance, wear and tear parts are quite cheap. It is quite easy to live with this car. So if you're thinking of buying this car, there's nothing much to be afraid of. What about living with it in terms of fuel consumption? Now, I get a very long-standing average consumption of 7.6 kilometers per litre, and this average out over 260,000 kilo. So that's a lot, right? It is not the best. Well, you're not getting really good fuel consumption, but for this size of a car, it's not really bank breaking, to be honest. It's quite okay, and I am not a slow driver. Very, very often I take this car way above, well, no, I wouldn't say way above, but above our national speed limit quite often. So if you are a very careful driver, it's really possible to reach 8 plus. If I do a short calculation, like on the fly calculation, it can get 8 plus to 9 kilometers per litre. That's 20 over cents. Right now I'm touching 30 cents per kilometers, I think, but you can get 20 over cents per kilometers. It's very, very possible. So in that sense, it's not very bad in terms of fuel consumption. It's quite livable. It's quite easy to live with. Now, another aspect that people would think about is, what about the size, you know? To be honest, this car is not as wide as a lot of European executive vehicle. Now, if you're driving a BMW 5 Series or a Mercedes-Benz E-Class, you are looking at roughly the same width, even though it feels a lot larger. Now, the reason why Alphard and the Vellfire feels a lot larger is not because it's actually that large. It's not very wide. In fact, the latest Kia Carnival is observably larger, wider than a second generation Alphard and first generation Vellfire. Why does the car feel so big? Is because it has a lot of perceived room, and it has a lot of room that is not to say usable, but it has a lot of room that does not obstruct your perception of how big this car is. It's essentially a box. So in that sense, it is it's not that big, it's not that wide. So in terms of parking, to be honest, I find that parking this car is a lot easier than parking in S-Class. If you think that the car is too big for you, you've obviously either not driven this car before, or you have that perception that is big stuck in your head and you're not looking at it for what it is, or looking at it for what it is. So all in all, it's very easy to live with. You don't have to worry about the size. If you have reasonable driving skills, it shouldn't be a problem at all to live with this on a daily basis. So to daily this car. One more issue that a lot of people talk about regarding the Alphard is, if you're thinking, hey, I don't have a big family, I don't carry around 5-person or 6-person in a car all the time, I don't carry big stuff, heavy stuff, unwieldy things, why do I need an Alphard? That is a correct way of thinking. If you don't need something, you don't need to buy it. That's true. However, if you have something, you will use it. And that is how life is, you know. We take advantage of our environment. Generally, what you think you need, you can use more than that. And if you have more, you will modify your lifestyle to take advantage of that extra space that you have. Give you an example. This car was out of commission for the better part of June. For the better part of July. So it was out of commission for the entirety of July. Now, I don't need to carry heavy things around all the time, but once in a while I do. Now, when I do them, even when I do, it's not that there is no alternative. There are other alternatives. I have other cars that can carry these things. I would fold down the seats and whatnot, or I can just get the supplier to deliver the goods and, you know, save me a ton of problem, just cost me a bit of money. But the thing is, when I don't have this car, I don't go around and do it. So these things that are needed at my workplace, well, they're not absolutely needed, it's just that they will beautify the place significantly. I've been putting it off the entirety of July. I got lazy because I don't have the tools lying around to get it done. Now, yes, I am procrastinating because, I could have gone around the problem. But what it shows you is that in life, there are a lot of times, there are certain things that is not absolutely needed, but you could do it, you can do it, and you ought to do it, but it's not vital that you do it. And if you don't have the tools lying around to get it done, you don't do it. But the funny thing is, the moment I got this car back, about a week after I got this car back, I instantly got it done because the tool was sitting there waiting for it to be done. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if you think you do not need a bigger car, if you think you don't need an Alphard because you don't lug around 6-person all the time, think again. You may. The reason is not because you may be adding more members to your family, but because the ability to carry 6-person in this car also allows you to do a lot of other things, like carrying unwieldy things, helping out your friend with the moving of their house, moving things from your house to your office, or from vice versa. So your lifestyle will change depending on whether the option is there available to you. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if you're thinking of buying a car and you're thinking of buying a utilitarian car, instead of going for an SUV, you can really consider an Alphard, because as I've shown just now, the operational cost and the ownership cost is not that high. They are quite easy to maintain, they're not that expensive. Number two is they are not that expensive to run, they're not very cheap, but in terms of SUV level, they're very similar. And number three, the need factor. You don't need such a big thing. Well, think again, like I said, you may use it. You don't need it, but you may utilize it if you haven't. So these three factors really sums up this car. It's how much is it in the market? I think it's not cheap. A lot of them are a similar age ones are going for 80 over 1,000, which is reflected in the fact that the trade-in price is 70 over 1,000. So they are selling for 80 over 90,000 ringgit. It's not cheap considering the car is 8 years old, but it is very reliable. You just have to remember this, is that Toyota has Japanese car in general has less tolerance when it comes to mistakes. Give you an example, servicing a Mercedes-Benz E-Class takes twice as much engine oil as this car does. Not because the capacity or the engine in the E-Class is larger, it's just that they are built in that way that, if there's a leak or whatever, there are just a lot more reservoir of oil for the car to utilize and continue. So it has the error margin is a lot wider, whereas in the Japanese car you have 4-5 liters of engine oil there, and if you suddenly sprout a serious leak, and you thought it wasn't serious, and you just carry on for a bit more, and it may just break. So the error margin is a little bit smaller. I would fully recommend you to go out there and buy this car. Don't spend too much. A lot of this high spec Alphard and Velfire, after a while, these items are not really that useful. Get a medium spec or even a low spec one. It will serve its purpose, especially when it's of this age. All the bling factor is gone. You don't need all this extra refrigerator, center console and whatnot. So get a medium spec, get a lower spec, pay less, pay 80,000 ringgit, 70 over 1,000 ringgit, get a 8-year-old, 7-year-old Toyota Alphard or Velfire, and it will serve you very well. Strongly recommend it. And after the engine transplant, I felt I'm going to keep this car because it's just so good. Autophiles signing out. Toyota Alphard.